with the union coal miner, or dare I say, steel worker in Weirton as compared to the NRA guy in Dixie, West Virginia, which is as rural as it sounds. How do you mix them all together? And I think that might be where some of that comes from. But then again, you got to do that, in Tennessee for East Tennessee and Memphis too. So anyway, it's always good talking to you, and I look forward to doing it again.
All right, sounds good. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
All right.
For more information about Relief Factor and the 2-week quick start for just $19.95, go to relieffactor.com. That's relieffactor.com.
Pitchers and catchers are going to report very shortly, and one pitcher, Daniel Norris, that we're all familiar with from Science Hill High School, is going to report right here to 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities and the Tri-Cities Sports Now with me, Marquis Bilson. One catcher that's reporting and hopefully in a better mood. Do you see this? And I'm holding it up, his picture right here. The backup catcher of the Pirates, Elias Diaz, his mother had been kidnapped. That's a fun day. Now, they're from Venezuela. And, his mother had been kidnapped. And it's believed that the police were involved in the kidnapping. I want to criticize American police right there. Show me the police department that is actively kidnapping. This is something out of a bad novel or movie or something like that. This is incredible. But, they no longer kidnapped and such. So a load off of Diaz's mind, certainly, as he reports to Bradenton, Florida, for spring training here very shortly. And our next guest at the top of the hour, Daniel Norris, will be reporting to Chino Lake Stadium, is that what they call it, in Lakeland, Florida. By the way, Lakeland and Detroit, I believe, have an agreement. They will be there for 100 years. They have an agreement that goes until 2034, and the Tigers moved their spring training base to Lakeland, Florida, way back, I think it was 1934. They moved from San Antonio, of all places. And, yes, don't ask me how I know that. I do. I guess because I've been to both Lakeland and San Antonio, and I've did a story on how long it's the longest continuous streak, spring training base in all of baseball. So the Tigers in Lakeland. Meanwhile, the Braves they're getting a new complex in 2019, and they're, jumping all over the place. It was Orlando and Disney. It was West Palm Beach. It was, I think when they were in Milwaukee, they were in Bradenton, to tell you the truth, if memory serves. I could be wrong about that, but I think that years ago, they too were out there in Bradenton. So anyway, but we're going to have Daniel Norris on, and there's a piece here, The Burning Questions. It was on Yahoo. The Burning Questions that every team had to face this spring training or this baseball season. Now, there are 30 teams, 30 questions. I'm going to bore everybody to tears if I go down and say, well, this is what the Rays are looking at. And that's not kind of, But let's first look at the Tigers, and the question is, the man we're going to talk to in just about 10 minutes, is Daniel Norris a mainstay? Injury troubles for Norris? He was, of course, traded 2 years ago from the Blue Jays. He was the major piece of the puzzle. Only 25 years old, but a 5.31 ERA last year. Tigers, they don't have Verlander anymore. In fact, by the end of the year, they were playing, it seemed like, as more of the Toledo Mud Hens in Detroit than actual Detroit Tigers. That's one of the ways I thought that the Indians were able to win 22 in a row. They feasted on the Tigers, and I believe, what was the other team they feasted on? The White Sox. for 11 of their 22 victories. And by that time, those two teams had basically traded everyone away. And Norris, too, spent much of that late season on the shelf with injuries. Michael Fulmer figures to be the top starter of the Tigers. Where does Norris fit in? We'll ask him what he's hoping to be. All right. Let's look at the other questions around. And I'm going to go with Braves and Reds, Yankees and Dodgers, the world champion Astros. And then you sort of take your liberties and you say, all right, who has the most interesting questions? And to me, that would be the Giants. That's right, the San Francisco Giants. Because the Giants are kind of like the 1983 Phillies. What? Only I can make these analogies. Do you know what the 1983 Phillies are? I guess you have to know your Phillies history. You have to know that in 1950 they were called the Whiz Kids because all their players in the starting lineup were 30 or younger. Actually, most of them were about 30. They were called the Whiz Kids for that. It's a takeoff on Quiz Kids, which was a popular radio show all that night. We're talking about 1950, okay? So I actually found the 1950s Phillies fight song on YouTube. It sounds like a carousel song, okay? Like what you'd play when you're riding on a merry-go-round. That sort of music. So maybe we'll get to it here later on. I write that down. A Phillies fight song, okay. If I can find the Tigers fight song. They actually have one from 68. It's pretty decent. But the Giants ask, and then I should say in 83, the Phillies had Pete Rose, Tony Perez, Steve Carlton, Joe Morgan, all at the end of their careers. And so the Whiz Kids became the Wheeze Kids. And both of them lost the World Series to teams that were neighboring them. In 83, the Orioles, and in 50, the Yankees. Anyway, so Whiz Kids, Wheeze Kids, that's Phillies history. Now the Giants are trying to be the Wheeze Kids. Will an aging lineup survive the spring? So much, by the way, for, they're not signing the veterans. Collusion. Well, at least with trades like for Andrew McCutchen, Evan Longoria and Austin Jackson have all been added to the Giants lineup. Every projected starting position player, with the exception of second baseman Joe Panik, is in his 30s. The Wheeze Kids. So the Giants, a little long in the tooth, this is an even year. I guess they didn't do it in 16. But you know, with the Giants, 10, 12, 14, Madison Bumgarner was on the shelf last year, so long with injuries. I still think Bumgarner, even over Kershaw, that's debatable. I'm thinking here. I think I would take Bumgarner over Kershaw just because Bumgarner can give you more innings when he's on after an injury-plagued year last year. Maybe not. But we'll have to wait and see. The Wheeze Kids. Bumgarner's now a veteran. Hey, The Wheeze Kids, the Giants. Team to look for. Team of recognizable names. Buster Posey. How will they do next year? Should be a fun team, recognizable team. Might get a little bit more in the ratings, that sort of thing. Now let's look at the geography, the two local teams. Atlanta Braves, how close are the kids? Our expectations for Atlanta could evolve rapidly if Ronald Acuna, he's not going to be traded, becomes the star that the Braves think that he will be. Pitchers, it's no more Dickey and Colon. I didn't understand those signings either last year. I guess Dickey did win 10 games. But Kyle Wright and Mike Soroka. Lefties Luis Gohara, Colby Allard, Max Fried. Remember those names? Yes, Wright, Soroka, Gohara, Allard, Fried. There are lots of guys in the farm that could come up. Third baseman Austin Riley. All of those are listed among the top 100 prospects in baseball. That's right. Pitchers, here we go. Kyle Wright, Mike Soroka, Luis Gohara, Colby Allard, Max Fried, and then Austin Riley, the third baseman. Rio Ruiz really does not look long for the Atlanta Braves. Acuna also out there. He's the top prospect of them all in the outfield. Braves going the opposite way of the Giants, I guess, with a younger team. Who can blame them? Still, most people think they're a year away, but are they? Julio Teheran, though, figures to get the opening day start, and that'll be, I believe, his 5th straight opening day start. Is that correct? I think I had seen that he figures to get his 5th straight opening day start. Teheran doesn't figure, you figure someone like that, it's going to be a Necro, a Smoltz, a Glavine, a Maddox. But I think he is actually going to be 3rd all-time in Braves history, at least Atlanta Braves history. I don't know where he ranks against Warren Spahn and those guys, as the opening day starter. Teheran, Julio Teheran. Think about that. Speaking of pitching rotation, Cincinnati Reds. Recent seasons have gotten off to a bad start in Goodyear, Arizona. There's also a Buckeye, Arizona near there, so it makes a lot of sense that, the Cincinnati Reds would train there, doesn't it? They're in Arizona these days. Okay, so the Reds rotation had a lot of injuries here. Of course, they had some bats last year. I thought the Reds did very well. But the elbow issues put Homer Bailey and Anthony DeSclafani on the shelf prior to the start of the season. They can't afford that. No team can afford that this year. Now, if DeSclafani and Bailey, as well as the lefty Brandon Finnegan, can get through the spring healthy, maybe the Reds don't finish in last place again. There's not a lot picked out of the Reds, really, or the Braves this year. Braves might have the more upside potential because of their youth, but we shall see. Told you about the Tigers. Their question is, Daniel Norris a mainstay? Let's go to the Yankees. What happens at 2nd and 3rd? Just about Giancarlo Stanton getting there and all that. But they've got Gleyber Torres, Michael Andujar. Those are pretty good prospects. Remember that? Miguel Andujar, forgive me, Andujar and Torres. Remember that in the infield. Plus Ronald Torres, Tyler Wade, Jace Peterson, him. There's a good presence in the lineup last year, and Danny Espinosa. So, they're all over the place on infielders. Who's going to play? I couldn't see Peterson not being in a lineup, though. I've got to be honest with you there. Dodgers is Hyun-Jin Roy. There you go. Is right. I think that's a R-Y-U. Am I pronouncing his name correctly? Can he take on a larger role? Darvish isn't going. He's, gone. I think the Cubs, by the way, overpaid for Darvish. I don't see Darvish as a number 1 starter. I know he was a number 1 starter on the Rangers. Rangers, and I don't care if it's 2 years ago when they have the best record in the American League. I knew they weren't going to win in the playoffs. They had no pitching. They have a 4-team division, and they slugged their way. I guess the Astros are now in it, so they don't have a 4-team division anymore. Forgive me, I am mistaken. But they slugged their way to the division title in 16, and they haven't been back. Can't get anybody out. Darvish was kind of part of that problem the first half of last year, so I thought Darvish signing with the Cubs paid too much for him. I wouldn't be all that interested in Darvish. For that matter, I thought the Dodgers. Why are you getting, Darvish, really? Why don't you just ask Hill to throw a few more innings? Well, I can't do that. He's done after 2. Exaggerating a little bit. But the Dodgers will need to keep their deep stash of starters to step up, like Rich Hill, maybe going 162 innings. And Royal, who had 126 2/3 innings last year, that was his only meaningful work. Dave Roberts is taking pitchers out too early. That's the thing right there. My question is Dave Roberts actually going to let a pitcher throw 9? The answer will be no. And that might be the Achilles heel of the Dodgers. But can Roy R-Y-U, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble pronouncing his name, my apologies. Can he get more innings than the 128 and a fraction more? And if he can, maybe that helps the Dodgers out a little bit more. And finally, the Astros. Can lefty relief be found on the current roster? That's the only Achilles heel. Left-handed pitching. Everybody needs it. That's why they were willing to give Steve Howe a million chances, right? That's a dated comment. But anyway, the question that a lot of people think, Tony Sipp, can he be that lefty out of the pen, that situation? Final year of his contract, so he's got that motivation. Buddy Boshers, Anthony Ghost. These are guys off the scrap heap, waiver wire, Rule 5. Yeah. The lefty pitching. Can a good left-handed bat sink the Astros this year? That's the question. I think the Astros and Yankees, I mean, they really do look to be the teams to beat, to repeat. But I'll be interested to think about Daniel Norris. What's he going to say about his Tigers? Lowly last year. Can they make a comeback this year? We're going to find out in just about a minute. First, I want to tell you that J-Ray's Heating and Air in Irwin, from installation and maintenance and repair for your heating and air needs. Locally owned and insured, traded. Call Jake Keplinger, 423-948-8016 for your free estimate. Jake Keplinger, 423-948-8016. A free estimate from J-Ray's Heating and Air, installation, maintenance, if your heater's out, what have you. They're the ones to call at 423-948-8016. I'm going to befriend Daniel Norris when we come back. Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Bilson.